Welcome to 2017 and another year of Dan Really Likes Wine. Now, there's lots of great stuff about January. Test matches at Newlands, summer in the air, time on the beach before you have to go back to work. It's also a month where generally finances are not at a premium. My wife only gives me my pocket money at the end of the month, so I'm trying to make my way through until then on some wine of a slightly lower budget than I might be used to. And so that's what I've got this week. 4 bottles of wine that are each 50 Rand or less. I went down to my local Pick n Pay, got them all there. It's not stuff that's going to light up the award ceremonies of the year ahead, but it's wine that is drinkable and better, and in one case made by a winemaker who's got rather a lot of clout. But let's start with the first of them, and a wine that is fairly well known for being entry level. The Du Toit cellar has always kept a fairly low price on its product and delivered some pretty good fare for that price. It's in a lovely part of the world. It's not too far off the beaten track. It's a nice part of the world to explore, and their wines are pretty consistent. They don't knock you off your socks, but they will give you something very, very pleasant and at an extremely good price. So I've started with a couple of white wines because most of the wine you get in that less than 50 Rand category is probably going to be fairly young. White wine is generally cheaper than red wine in South Africa, and if you're going to drink something that's not very old, you want to go for a white rather than a red, and particularly a Sauvignon Blanc. While Sauvignon Blanc is something that can be drunk a lot later than we often give it credit for in South Africa, it is the most accessible of our wines. So a fresh Sauvignon Blanc, this is 30 odd Rand if memory serves, and it's not a bad buy at all. So as you can see from the colour, this is pale to the point of English or German tourists stepping off the plane in Cape Town for a summer holiday. We'll move on to the red version a little later. Very, very pale, but it's still got quite a nose to it. It's got that big fruity gooseberry, not terribly subtle, but it's pleasant, it's nice. It's got a big bouquet to it, and it does say that there is some substance to the wine. So pretty much what you'd expect. It's a little on the sharp side, a little on the tangy side, but there's a good bit of fruit there, a little bit of ripeness, and as it's only 2016, it's nothing less than you would expect. It's eminently drinkable. You can quite happily have a bottle of this beside the pool or as you're having a braai through summer, and because it costs you so little, you can throw in an extra bottle and it won't hurt the bank balance too much. So nothing award-winning, nothing spectacular, but a good, solid, budget-friendly Sauvignon Blanc. Next up, probably the best known of this week's wine, although it might not look entirely familiar. They've changed the labelling in the last little while, so it's got a slightly different feel to it, but it's a wine that has been very, very popular for a long time now. You might remember when we did our episode on Chardonnay, I mentioned my friend Caroline, who hates Chardonnay and drinks ABC, anything but Chardonnay. Well, this is what she drinks most of. She actually introduced me to Baton Blanc. She had it at her wedding to my good friend AJ, and it's a wine from the Constantia Valley that has stood a long test of time. It is a white blend. Now, often white blends are they sort of food-oriented white blends. They're quite big wines. They're quite a big mouthful. This one, past experience, is actually relatively light, and it's the kind of wine that just takes you happily drifting through a summer's day very comfortably indeed. So like the Du Toit, there is Sauvignon Blanc here, but this is a blend. Sauvignon Blanc leads the way, and I think that's what contributed to it being so easy drinking a wine. Again, incredibly pale, a very translucent wine, but as with the Du Toit, a very nice nose. That one a little fuller, there's a sort of almost rhubarbish type feel to it. I have had quite a bit of this in the past, and it's a welcome addition to our quartet for a long January. So while technically this is last year's vintage, given we're now in 2017, it's still a very, very young wine, and you can feel that effervescence on the tongue that just says we could do with a little bit longer to settle down. But that said, quite pleasant to drink now. Wine that is sold by virtue of being extra cold is not something I'm massively fond of, But if you do drink this nice and cold on a hot summer's day, it's going to prove massively refreshing and keep you going through that hot sun of summer. And also at 50 rand a bottle, which is what I paid for it, for an estate like Buitenverwachting, which has a very well-deserved reputation for being one of the powerhouses of Constantia wine. This is very good value for a very nice wine, and you could certainly do worse than this for summer. So we've had a couple of Sauvignon Blancs, and Sauvignon Blanc would be my pick for something if you're on a tight budget, because it's probably going to be a little better than some of the red wines, which by and large, if they're under the 50 rand category, you're probably going to struggle to get something that's particularly good, or more importantly, that's had the time to develop into what it should be. The lower end range of wines tend to get pushed out into the market far too quickly. And it's a business, it's the economy, it's understandable. So what can you do to try and get past that? Well, my first suggestion would be to look for a Merlot outside of a Pinot Noir, and if you're paying 50 rand or less for a Pinot Noir, you probably don't want to be drinking it. For a wine that is red and that's under 50 rand, I'd suggest Merlot is your best bet. It's the softest and the smoothest of the wines. We'll be having a look later on this month at Merlot, which I think is another one of our slightly more underrated grapes. This is 2015, so it's just moving into 2 years old. It's from the Arabella estate out near Robertson. I've got a personal link to this. Jamie de Vet out at the estate. I was the DJ at his 21st birthday party many years ago when I put myself through university by playing some very bad 80s music at parties across the Western Cape. I had some of the wine then. I've had a lot of it since, and it's wine that's very simple. It's a blue-collar wine. It's unashamedly at the more entry-level side of things, but they just make good, wholesome wine. And I think this Merlot, at about 40 rand a bottle or thereabouts, is probably one of the better lower budget red wines you're going to get to see yourself through January. So they've been making wine at the Arabella estate in one form or another since the 1600s. So it's got a bit of street cred and a bit of history, and they do know what they're doing when it comes to wine that's at that slightly lower level in terms of price. It's just good, solid fare. It's got a nice rich cherry colour, and while I'm not expecting to fall over with delight, I think I might be pleasantly surprised. And indeed I am. It's got that smooth, soft Merlot character. Merlot is often written off for not having enough of its own character, but in this case, it's absolutely fine. The cherry that you see in the colour is reflected to a degree in the palate. It's not too sharp, it's not too tannic, it's not making you reach for the Rennies. It's not something you're going to keep for years and years to come, and it's probably not something you're going to celebrate a 50th birthday or a wedding anniversary with, but through January, on a tight budget, this is very pleasant, eminently drinkable, and a tribute to the de Vet family making some really nice wine out at Arabella. And then to the last of our January lifesavers. This is Eagles Cliff. It's between Worcester and Villiersdorp. It's not somewhere you might have come across, but you might have come across the winemaker Christian Groenewold, because not only is he a former Diners Club Winemaker of the Year, he also appeared on Boersoeke Vrou. And if you like watching Cakenet and like watching what is one of the biggest shows in South Africa, you might remember him shedding tears in a rather emotional moment. Boersoeke Vrou might not have been his greatest success. Wine certainly has been, and this is his second double. He's got Arendskloof, which is the more respected, more high-end, pricier stuff, but this is a really good alternative. It is inexpensive, it's very solid, and as we had Merlot with our previous wine, this is a Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot blend. So hoping that the Merlot softening that Cab Sav just makes it easy enough to drink in early 2017. So again, it's got a really nice rich colour, the same sort of cherry feel to the previous wine, and it's one that I tasted with a great deal of surprise the first time I had it, when it was younger than it is now, because I really wasn't expecting much from Eagles Cliff, but they surprised me then. Let's see if they do again. So this might sound a little counterintuitive. I think it's probably just a slightly better wine than the Merlot, just not right at the moment. It needs a little bit longer. That Cabernet Sauvignon probably hasn't found time to settle in yet. Now, granted, it's an entry-level wine, and unashamedly so you're not expecting great things, but another year or two probably wouldn't hurt. That said, it's still drinking pleasantly right now, and pair it with the right food, a nice braai, good bit of steak, and you're probably going to have a very solid companion indeed. It's got lovely colour to it. I do love that sort of deep rustiness to red wine, and in the hands of Christian Groenewold, it's obviously being made by somebody who really does know what he's doing, and while this might be the bottom end of his offerings to the wine market, it's one that you can drink with confidence and with enjoyment. So those are 4 wines. They're all under 50 Rand, and there are quite a few others you can find that aren't in a dissimilar price point, and with a little bit of exploration you can dig up some real gems. Although if you really want to find stuff that's at a great price, I'd head out into the winelands yourself, go and explore a few estates and see what you can dig up. For now, here are 4 examples to try and get you through January. If you would like them yourself, you can get them at danreallylikeswine.com. Do enjoy, and here's to a fantastic 2017. Cheers.